Okay, we're going to get started with our final session of this workshop to address the digital divide and expanding opportunity in rural America. And to address this important issue, we are honored to have Ryan Harkins. And Ryan is the Director of State Affairs and Public Policy for Microsoft's U.S. Government Affairs team. And in that role, he serves as the lead lawyer on state legislation and policy issues, including privacy and data security. And you know he's courageous because he's unafraid to include the fact that he's a lawyer in his bio. He's a 10-year veteran of the company, and he's testified before a number of legislatures, is a frequent speaker at conferences and other events. He is a non-resident fellow at Stanford Center for Internet and Society, and he also serves as an adjunct professor at the Seattle School of Law, where he teaches courses on privacy and cybercrime. He's also a graduate of the University of Notre Dame and the University of Washington Law School. So let's please welcome Ryan Harkins.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here. I understand that I am the only thing standing between you guys and going home, so thank you for sticking around. I know you've spent the last day and a half talking a lot about workforce development, and I'd like to spend a little time stepping back to talk about something which is incredibly important to enable a lot of the new opportunities that lots of very smart people have been working on to provide new opportunities for students, mid-career professionals, and others to gain new skills, the skills that are necessary in order to get jobs in the 21st century. And that is access to broadband. You know, we are living through what many people refer to as the fourth industrial revolution. It is a revolution that is fundamentally powered by cloud computing. So that is the use of massive data centers which can collect lots and lots of data and process it with extremely powerful technologies, AI, machine learning, terms that you hear in the news just about every day. And it's hard to understate just how much this new wave of technology is transforming everything around us. I mean, it is transforming education. It is bringing change to small businesses. It's helping to transform healthcare. It's providing new opportunities to connect workers to new skills and get new jobs. It's even helping to transform agriculture with new solutions that enable you to, I mean, we have a project, which I'll show you a video about, outside Carnation, Washington, which uses inexpensive sensors like this to enable precision farming. So you mine a farm with sensors. They can read moisture levels and take other composition readings of the soil, transfer that back to the cloud, and help farmers make more accurate forecasts on what they should do to make their farms more efficient, to increase yield, etc. But none of that is possible if you lack access to broadband. And today, in the 21st century, 34 million Americans don't have access to broadband, 23 million of whom live in rural communities. And you don't actually have to go far outside of the nation's supposed tech capitals to find communities that are affected by this. You can see on the map here, all of those white spaces across the country are communities that have 32% or less of their residents with access to broadband. Even in a place like California, you don't have to go far outside Silicon Valley to find communities without good access to broadband. And we know that in my home state here, Washington. You go over to eastern Washington, where I'm originally from, and you very quickly find communities that fall within this category. So this is a national crisis. I mean, perhaps 10 years ago, lack of access to broadband may have been something of an inconvenience, but today, it has created a real opportunity gap. because much of the world is racing ahead, taking advantage of all the opportunities technology is providing. And it means that each day that goes by, if you live in a community without access to broadband, you are falling further and further behind. And so that's in part why we launched a new initiative this summer. Our President and Chief Legal Officer, Brad Smith, announced what we've called our Rural Airband Initiative. And it is an initiative to help close the broadband gap using, among other things, new technology that we've been working on for nearly a decade, called TV Whitespaces. And in short, TV Whitespaces provides broadband over the air using unused TV channels. And so you literally can go and build a base station with a radio antenna, connect it to the backbone of the internet, and that is the fiber backhaul that you may see on the slide, and then you can send that signal out over the air to homes or small businesses or schools, which can receive the signal using basically TV whitespace radios. The radios can translate the signal into Wi-Fi inside your home or your office building, and so you can literally open your laptop and connect to the internet much the way most of us would. TV Whitespaces has an advantage over traditional methods of providing broadband because most traditional methods are prohibitively expensive to reach a lot of rural communities across the country and across our western states. It may cost $30,000 to $40,000 a mile to lay fiber in the ground. TV Whitespaces can be constructed much more cheaply. And there also, it has an advantage over some other fixed wireless technologies because the signals that TV Whitespaces uses travel further and go through obstacles better than, say, frequencies like Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. That means that if you build a single radio antenna, you can effectively serve a community that encompasses a radius of 10 miles. So, I mentioned we've been working on this technology for nearly 10 years, and we have a team of engineers that have spent much of the last few years around the world launching pilot projects. We've now launched pilot projects in over 20 states. They connect now nearly 200,000 people. And these are in places from rural Kenya to Colombia, Southeast Asia, and increasingly now here in rural America. I mentioned we launched this new initiative this summer, the Rural Airband Initiative. We have a very clear goal. We want to help solve and close the rural broadband gap in 5 years. And we want to do that. There are a number of different components to the project, but one thing we try to make clear is that we're not proposing TV Whitespaces as the silver bullet to completely solve by itself the rural broadband gap. TV Whitespaces, we think, could be an important tool that policymakers can use and have at their disposal, but we actually think that a mix of technologies would best serve us in attempting to close the gap most efficiently and most cheaply. And other technologies may be important as well, and the precise technology that is most effective really depends mostly on the population density of certain communities. So for most rural communities, really 80% of rural America, they have population densities of somewhere between 2 and 200 people per square mile. For those folks, we've penciled it out. We think TV Whitespaces is the most effective way to reach them. But for communities with slightly higher population densities, other fixed wireless technologies like cellular technologies, you may hear people refer to small cell, those are an important piece to solving this as well. We think those would be most effective for communities with higher population densities. The other end of the spectrum, you have extremely rural communities. Think a ranch somewhere outside well outside Moses Lake that may have only 1 person per square mile. For those folks, satellite is probably the only way to go. So back to our initiative, and why is all that important? Our initiative has 3 parts. And our real goal with the initiative, we've had to address a lot of misperceptions about what we're trying to do. Microsoft is not an internet service provider, and we have no desire of becoming an internet service provider. We are a cloud computing company. We provide services to people using our data centers over the internet. If you don't have access to broadband, you can't be our customer. If you don't have access to broadband, I'm sure you've talked over the last couple of days about the huge shortage in skills in our workforce. There are over 500,000 jobs open today in this country that require a computer science background. And yet, we produce only 43,000 students with a bachelor's degree that would match that background. We produce even fewer people through non-traditional pathways that don't require a bachelor's degree, but may require other credentials and certifications. There is a clear gap there. But if you don't have access to broadband, you can't reach the resources you need to gain those skills, and it means that companies like Microsoft aren't able to find all the employees we need to fill our jobs. So we don't actually care how you get connected, we want you to be connected. And our goal is to try to galvanize the marketplace. The first part of our initiative, it involves a series of pilot projects we're going to launch across the country over the next 5 years. The goal for those pilot projects is twofold. One, we hope those projects will directly connect 2 of the 23 million people who lack access to broadband today. But more importantly, we hope to elevate or raise visibility about TV white spaces as a sustainable business and as an effective solution to encourage other folks from the private sector, as well as partners from the public sector, to get involved and launch their own projects. So the pilot projects, we initially announced there would be 12 in 12 states over the next 12 months. We then added Montana. So there will now be 13 pilot projects over the course of the first year. In all these projects, we go in with a local partner on the ground, an ISP. And Microsoft's role is really to buy down the business and technical risk for a project to make it more affordable for our partners. So we will go in and invest in the capital infrastructure necessary to build the base station and provide the radios to homes. It's then up to our partner to run the business moving forward. And we've announced we have no intention of profiting from any of these pilot projects. That's not our goal. In fact, while we'll typically execute a revenue sharing agreement with our partners on the ground, once we recoup our capital investment, we're out of the project and it's theirs to run. And the goal is to take those funds we recoup and dump them over into another project and continue building out the network of projects over the course of the next 5 years. So, the other component about the program is that we have announced a multi-year, multi-million-dollar partnership with the National Council for the 4-H. And this is a piece that our Microsoft Philanthropies group, I don't know, Jane Broom may have mentioned it yesterday, is running. The goal here is in all the communities that are receiving new access to broadband, to train teenagers who are part of 4-H so that they can turn around and train other members of their communities, provide them with digital skills, and help them take better advantage of the broadband that they'll be receiving. And the final component, I mentioned at the beginning that our goal with this entire project is to try to galvanize the marketplace. And so to do that, we've announced that we have access to 39 patents we've developed, plus a bunch of source code related to this technology. We've announced that we'll provide access to that royalty-free, free of charge to anyone who wants it. So if you're a local ISP somewhere and you want to start your own TV white spaces project, we'll give you the access to the technology you need it. If you're a state somewhere and you want to partner with the private sector in your community to get a project up and running, we will provide you the technology you need to do that. So there are a few things, the private sector and Microsoft, we're obviously trying to do a lot to help solve this problem. But there are also things that the public sector can be doing. One is that there's a ton of work going on at the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. And that, for those of you who aren't steeped in, there are people who spend their entire lives, you know, in spectrum policy and in following this stuff, and they all speak their own language. They speak Greek, as far as I'm concerned. But the FCC is responsible for, among other things, managing the country's use of spectrum, which is a public asset. And there are proceedings happening at the FCC which will determine whether there will continue to be available spectrum, so think those unused TV channels, available for the public to use to access broadband using TV white spaces. So we're doing a lot of work at the FCC to impress upon them the importance of this as a solution to the rural broadband gap, and we've been enlisting support from governors and state lawmakers and other leaders at the state and local level to raise their hands with the FCC and say, we like what Microsoft is trying to do here, we think this is important, we think you should find a way to help make this happen. The other thing is that we started to explore the role that public funding may be able to play in helping to solve the broadband gap faster. So I mentioned that through our pilot projects alone, we intend to reach 2 million of the 23 million rural Americans who lack access to broadband. Well, we'd love to go into state houses and say, you know, if the state would pony up a little money, or if there's an existing program that might provide some money, say to a local ISP, could we build upon the 2 million and make it 4, or 6, or 8, etc. So those are conversations that we're just starting to have. Finally, back, and this is a workforce development conference. And so why am I talking about broadband? Back to why this is important, and back to why I think it's important for this group. I mentioned that broadband is incredibly important to connecting people to the new kinds of programs that can provide them with the skills they need to get jobs of tomorrow. You know, we at Microsoft, and Jane and other colleagues of ours have been working for several years on a number of programs to try to expand access to computer science education, for example. One of those is our TEALS program, Technology, Education, and Literacy in Schools. This program is one of my favorite stories at the company because it started in 2009 with a Microsoft engineer named Kevin Wang, who was a former high school teacher. And he said, you know what, I still have a passion for teaching, and I don't think enough kids have access to the kind of education they need to go on and study computer science, so I'm going to volunteer in a high school in South Seattle and help teach computer science. So he did. That first year, he partnered with a classroom teacher and reached 12 students. Over time, this grew into a formal program at Microsoft, where the goal is to place software engineers in the classroom with a high school teacher and to create a sustainable computer science program in more high schools around the country, because one of the challenges with providing more high school students access to this kind of thing is there simply aren't enough teachers available who are qualified to teach it. And we don't even have enough software engineers available to fill the jobs we're creating. And so over the course of 1 or 2 years, the engineer teaches with the teacher, trains the teacher up, so that at the end of that, the teacher can continue teaching the class moving forward. This past year, we are in 29 states plus the District of Columbia. So the program has grown from 12 students to over 12,000. And we should give credit where credit is due. I mean, Microsoft today only provides 25% of the software engineers who participate in this program. Other companies, big technology companies, really anybody with engineers on staff who have expertise in computer science can participate in this program. Here's why I'm mentioning this. Over 10% of the schools we reach are in rural communities. And if you don't have access to broadband, you can't participate in the program. I'd like to show you a quick video to how we reach rural schools.
The people take pride in who they are, and it's a good place to live.
You take the good with the bad. Not a whole lot of interest in different things. Technology is where he wants to be. He learned what he could on his own, but then he didn't know where to go from there. He didn't even know how to go from there.
I want to be a software engineer. Be awesome. I just like.
And after this class came and the program started, he just can't wait for third period.
I'm a software engineer working for Microsoft, and I teach in the mornings through a program called TEALS. Well, TEALS is largely local. What we're doing this year is to try to take a lot of the successes that we've had locally and see if we can have a national impact. I believe that people shouldn't be limited just by kind of where they were born and the circumstances they were born into. I'm teaching remotely, but out into rural Kentucky. And that's huge. That's so huge for me.
Well, TEALS has been a godsend to us. We couldn't afford the teachers and the program, and so Microsoft has stepped in, and we're very thankful.
And it's just helped him all the way around. Sky's the limit for him now.
Look, I thought I wasn't going to go to college, and now I'm considering it, and it changed my life.
How do you thank somebody enough to know that your child knows he's somebody now and going to be great?
So this is rural Kentucky, but that could just as well be a community in Pend Oreille County here in Washington, or Kellogg, Idaho, or southeastern Oregon. If you don't have access to broadband, these kinds of opportunities are not available to you. And it's not just K-12 education. I mean, you know, we have Imagine Academy. There are other programs, obviously, that can provide Western Governors or University, you know, that can provide access to new training in digital skills. If you don't have access to broadband, you can't access any of them. So this is another, I know this is a workforce development conference, but this is one of my favorite projects that we're working on at Microsoft. This is the Precision Agriculture Project. It's outside Carnation, Washington, which if you know, you're from Washington State, you know, Carnation, Washington is not exactly the heart of rural America, but ignore that. We have a similar project in upstate New York, and there are other precision agriculture projects in rural California and in other places. This is an example of the kind of thing that broadband can make available to small businesses, local communities in rural America.
The set carriers have very little incentive to provide connectivity in the farms. Now you can connect multiple devices and connectivity is cheap. So you can actually deploy many more sensors in the farm. You can have a dense deployment of sensors getting real-time view of all the parts of the farm. Not only your soil and moisture data, but this is a high bandwidth connection. You can connect cameras, get real-time views from the farm. Once you have all this data, you could then analyze the data to predict what the future will look like.
I'm actually really looking forward to how the process will change. This last year has been mainly a data gathering, information collecting year for the Microsoft research team. I'm really looking forward to seeing what research they've gathered this year, putting that together with what I think is going to happen next year, and make predictions for what I should plant when and where.
The broader point here being perhaps that it's not just the technology industry that is creating jobs that require digital skills. It is literally every industry across the country. And who knows, at some point in the future, perhaps farmers will be spending as much time on a computer as they do in the soil. How are we doing on time, by the way?
You're good, you got 15 minutes.
15 minutes, okay. I want to show you one more because, you know, there are other communities where, whether it's through the E-rate program or other federal programs, where schools have access to broadband, but when students go home, they don't. And so they either can't do homework assignments that are being given to them in schools, or they can't get access to, say, online courses through the community college in order to get a leg up, or they might have to go to places like McDonald's or other fast food restaurants, which creates other issues, in order to gain access to broadband. This is a project that we have launched in Charlotte and Halifax counties in Virginia, Southern Virginia, which is an effort to provide access to broadband to school kids, most of whom don't otherwise have it.
Just because you live in a rural area doesn't mean you shouldn't have the opportunity to be connected.
That was about, I'd say, 9th grade year is when I began taking college classes through dual enrollment. And that requires that you upload papers and assignments to the college as well as to the high school. The internet was terrible at home, so I would have to do my assignments really early, like a whole month early.
He had to submit a lot of his paperwork. It's just going to sit there and just spin and spin and spin.
You know that the deadline's coming, and you know you need more research, you know it's not enough. It's a struggle.
In the beginning of the semester, one of the questions I asked the students, just a show of hands, who has internet access? And typically, just a few. Right there, that tells me that I have to be a little limited in any kind of homework assignment I give. It's a handicap for teachers in the 21st century. I mean, here we are, hands are kind of tied.
The homework gap is a major problem for our region. And the exciting part is that Charlotte and Halifax County, our two pilot areas, are no longer going to be left behind in this digital divide. TV white space is a new technology that the FCC has allowed vendors to transmit broadband connections wirelessly over previously unused airwaves. Rural markets specifically, it is critical to have access to that lower band spectrum that allows internet providers to serve that last mile affordably. The goal is by fall to have about 250 connected, and we're hoping to have 1,000 families connected soon after that.
It's going to open the doors to economic development and allow people in our area to have access to a world-class education.
It was a dramatic increase in productiveness and efficiency.
Dylan has a small antenna at his home, which is connected to a TV white space device, turns on his laptop, connects via Wi-Fi.
I don't know the tech side, all I know is it works.
Now that I have TV white space internet, I can use the cloud, and my grade actually shot up going forward with TV white space. I got high B's and A's.
This is where I grew up and I love it. I'm a country girl. Just train our kids so they can stay home and have that knowledge, and then they can bring it back here so that our community can grow.
TV white space held up very well with my college application. Once I graduate, I will be going to attend Old Dominion University in the fall, studying computer science. And I'm very excited to go.
So, our hope is to solve the rural broadband gap in 5 years and make these kinds of opportunities available to everybody across this country. We're asking for partnerships from the states to do a handful of things. One, as I mentioned, is folks who are willing to raise their hand with the FCC and help ensure that there will continue to be adequate access to the spectrum necessary to provide this. We love that support. Folks who are interested in having conversations about public funding, whether it's matching grants, etc., to make the 2 million people we're going to connect 4, 6, or 8. We love to have those conversations. And frankly, we love to have conversations with folks about how we can work with you. You know, I mentioned we have this partnership with the National Council for the 4-H. Are there other creative or innovative things we could do or partner with you to help provide access to more programs necessary to give people the kinds of skills they need in the communities that receive access to broadband? So with that, I think maybe we have a few minutes left for questions. I'd be happy to try to answer questions if anyone has any. Or maybe y'all just want to go home.
The states that you're partnering with, how did that come about? Was there a proposal that they needed to do? What kind of partnership are you looking at with those states?
So we have the 13 states where we're launching pilot projects. And I mean, to be perfectly candid, we didn't have a real sophisticated analysis about choosing those states necessarily. I mean, in Washington State, it's our home state, so it was an obvious tie there. But otherwise, it was a matter of the team of folks who are responsible for driving these projects. They're run by a guy named Paul Garnett. It was a matter of them just meeting ISPs who were willing and able to be partners in those communities. And so, you know, you may not see your state on that initial list of 13. It doesn't necessarily mean your state can't be on the next wave or the next wave after that. And if you have suggestions on communities that would be good candidates for the program, on local partners, ISPs who'd be good candidates to partner with us, we'd love to have that conversation. There was, yeah.
Great presentation. I had two questions. One was a technical question. When you use the term broadband, what kind of download speeds you're talking about? I mean, there's a huge effort in urban areas, obviously, to increase those download speeds. And secondly, looking internationally at the developed countries, your chart had a lot of developing countries, but looking at the developed countries, where does the U.S. stack up compared to them? in terms of providing access to the entire population?
Those are good questions. So I can't answer your second question. I'd be happy to, if you'd like, provide more information about how the U.S. compares relatively to other developed and developing countries. As far as speeds go, the TV white space projects today can provide broadband that meets the FCC's definition of broadband, which is 25 megabits per second down and 3 megabits per second up. That basically is fast enough for you to stream a movie or do most anything that a consumer or small business would want to do. There are devices, so there are a whole network of companies that make the chips and the components and the radios needed to make this work. There are devices in the pipeline that we think could hit the market in about a year that could get over 400 megabits per second. So, the reality is that fiber will always be king. If we could get fiber to every home in America, by all means we should do that, but it'll cost us about $65 billion. The advantage TV white spaces has is it provides speeds that are good enough, and it's a whole lot cheaper to reach folks. I mean, we think we could solve the rural broadband gap using TV white spaces, other fixed wireless technologies, and satellite for about $8 billion.
I have a comment or a suggestion for people in other states that have been working on computer science programs. TEALS is Washington State's premier embedded professional development program. We had some schools in Eastern Washington. Quincy was one. They were the beginning of a seed that then spread from one school to about 8 surrounding school districts the following year. But having that professional side by side with the K-12 instructor, the subject matter in that embedded professional development, my life as an educator, this is, in my words, the best professional development that could ever be brought forward. So if you don't have TEALS in your state, jump on it.
Talk to Jane. We'll get you guys connected. Yeah.
I was wondering, have you reached out to the agriculture education community to embed more technology into their program standards?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm looking at Jane and Amy.
Can you elaborate more on?
Well, the National Ag Association has standards that we use in high school career tech ed programs. And very little of that involved technology.
Right.
And we see a growing need of technology in the agricultural community, just, even in what you showed here. So I was wondering if there had been any effort to reach out to them and help them embed more technology into their program standards.
So I'm glad you asked that question because it's one of the key things that we've learned through some of the partnerships we now have with 4-H is honestly, we had no idea that was an issue. And so them showing us that, actually showing some of the different data sets that they had, where technology was and was not mapping, we had no idea. So that's an example of when sometimes big companies that sit in a big city need to reach out a little bit more to broader and more diverse communities, and you learn more. So I think it is something we're going to start working on. We will always do that with and through partners like 4-H or other entities who can help us introduce, but we'll be, a source for content, like what's the right technology, what's the right way to make that happen, but clearly doing it hand in hand with educators. But it's funny you asked the question because it's a new thing for us.
Any others? I'm just glad you're not all asleep. Well, I'll stick around afterwards if anyone else wants to chat. Thank you for having me.